Hello and welcome to Educating Northants 2021. My name is Ben Newmark and I am a Trust-wide Vice Principal for the David Ross Education Trust, based mainly at Lodge Park. You can find me on Twitter at Ben Newmark. My presentation today is on Doug Lemob's means of participation, which I call joining in. Of course, there are lots and lots of different ways that children can join in with a lesson, but three examples might be being cold called, reading, or listening. My belief is that when means of participation are not explicit, we get problems. And I think it often works through a hierarchy. The first problem we have is confusion. If children don't know exactly what they're supposed to be doing at a point in the lesson, they often get confused. And when they get confused, the temptation to disrupt increases. If they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, well, they'll look for other tasks. And those tasks are probably things that we don't want them to be doing. When that happens, we get tension. I know as a teacher, I certainly feel that. Those moments in a lesson where you get this distinct sense that my pupils aren't with me. They're not doing what I want them to do. And when that happens, we often get arguments. We challenge pupils and tell them they're not doing what we expect them to be doing. But if we haven't been clear in the first place, what that often results is tension and them arguing back with us. Sir, they might say, I am doing what you asked me to do. I'm reading. Or they might say, I don't know what to do, and feel it very unfair that you are telling them off for something that you were never clear about in the first place. And when that happens, we get disorder and we get disruption. And finally, we might get the saddest symptom of this of all, which is apathy, with pupils thinking, well, no one knows what we're supposed to be doing, so why bother doing anything at all? We're not learning in this lesson. And I think it's all summed up in this horrible phrase, the sort of phrase as a teacher that sends chills down my spine. Sir, I don't know what to do. Or, sir, what are we supposed to be doing? So what happens when means of participation aren't clear? I'd like to go through an example. Now, on the face of it, the writing in italics on the screen in front of you, everyone open your books to page 73 and begin reading, looks actually really clear. But look at all the potential ways this could go wrong. You could have a pupil saying, I'm opening my book, but they're clearly not, or taking far too long to do it. You could have a pupil saying, oh, I am reading, when you've just caught them staring out the window. All they'll do is look back at their book and say, well, I am reading. You could have a pupil who is rummaging around in their bag for whole seconds or minutes at a time. I'm getting my highlighter, they might say. And because you were never explicit about how they should read, they could get pretty confrontational and argumentative if challenged about that. You might also have two pupils to decide one is going to read to the other. It's the third one. I'm reading it to Hisha. Again, if you look at my first italic phrase, we haven't been clear that pupils aren't expected to do that. So again, you might get this resistance or this anger about being called up or held to account over this because you never ruled that out as an option. Or finally, you might simply get, oh, I finished reading. And again, have they? Do we know that? Is there any way of checking? Causes us problems. So what happens when means of participation aren't clear? Well, simply pupils don't do what the teacher wants them to do. And I don't think it's controversial to say in lessons in schools, if teachers aren't successful in getting pupils to do what they ask them to do, well, we're not going to learn much in that lesson. Now, I'll be honest here, I've been teaching for a long time, nearly 20 years now, and I've got to accept that misunderstandings might be honest, or on occasion they might be disingenuous. A pupil might genuinely not understand what you mean, or if you haven't been clear, they could use that as an excuse to claim they don't understand what they're supposed to be doing, and you'll be unable to work out the difference because it won't be clear to you or them whether they are deliberately refusing to follow your instructions or whether they just don't know what your instructions were in the first place. And that makes it impossible for us to make good decisions about how to respond. What happens when means of participation aren't clear? Well, we might get these phrases, again linked to the examples on my last slide. I am opening the book. I am reading it. I am getting my highlighter. We are reading. This was the example about Hisham and one pupil saying, I'm reading to another. I have finished. It's very rare that you're going to call a pupil to hold them to account for not doing what you've expected if you haven't been clear, and they'll just go, yeah, you're right, sir. There will always be a justification or an excuse, and as I've said before, some of these will be genuine and some of them might be disingenuous. Again, we won't be able to work out which if we weren't super clear at the beginning. And as I said before, this in the end might lead to really unfortunate examples of apathy with a pretty chaotic class and pupils who would otherwise be willing to be engaged in learning in the lesson and simply thinking, well, nobody's doing what the teacher's doing, what the teacher's asked me to do. Nobody's doing what Mr. Newmark asked, so what's the point of me doing it? No one's learning anything. That's a doodle on my pencil case. I'll do something else. So how do we get over that? Well, the obvious answer is clarity. I've given you another example here. Again, it starts with us talking about the reasons for it, set it up nicely. Mov would call this your rollout speech. So I put here, I want you to all read this passage because it's beautiful. I want to know what you think about it. So you're then setting up an incentive for why you are going to be quite directive and clear about the way in which you expect them to read, which is the example I'm going on here. I am going to read out the second part just so you can see the way that I would deliver it, and you can see the level of detail and how iterative these instructions are, which I think then makes everything much clearer for everyone. So here we go. I'm going to count down from 3. And when I say go, get your anthology out, open it to page 73, and then I want you to hold it up so I can see you're on the right page. When I've checked everyone in the class, check we're all ready, I'll read, and I want you to track along. You won't need to make notes, so nothing in your hands apart from your anthologies once you put them down, please. 3, 2, 1, go. There we go. I think the result of that is that pupils will know exactly how they're supposed to be reading in the lesson. And what's more, the compliance to that will be really obvious. If pupils aren't holding up their anthologies on page 73, well, it's really clear that they haven't understood. Or if pupils haven't put down everything in their hand, or in fact fiddling with their pens, well, you can look around and check for that and create this culture of us all doing the same thing at the same time, which I think is absolutely conducive to good teaching and learning. So how do you plan for this? Well, back in the old days when I first trained, double planning was very fashionable, and it's time consuming and isn't always the best way of doing things. But I think there is some worth in thinking that way. So when you're going through your lesson plan, it might be a good idea to think, right, I'm going to do this piece of instruction, but what exactly am I going to expect people to do in that part of the lesson? What will that look like? Then once we've done that, you might need to think about what the best compromise is for everyone. Now, one of the problems here is that we do know that pupils prefer to do things in different ways. At home when they're reading, one pupil might prefer to curl up in a beanbag and read like that. Another pupil might prefer to sit on their couch. Someone might like to sit in their bed. Someone might like to read aloud to a friend. We know all of these preferences, but we've got to be pragmatic about this too and accept that we're going to have to find a compromise that works for everyone. And then execute that really well. So what is the best way of doing this activity that's going to work for the whole class, even if it doesn't meet the preferences of every individual in it? After that, think really carefully about how you'll communicate this. So I know what I want everyone to do. I know how I want the pupils to join in, but how exactly do I make that really, really clear? So there's no doubt. What other interpretations of what you want exist? I quite enjoy doing this. So you might do your planning and you might think, right, I want them to be reading along while I'm reading, tracking through those lines. Here's my script about how I'm going to deliver that instruction. What other interpretations of that could there be? And then once you work those out, you can refine your explanation to exclude that. So then you can be really clear that what pupils do is exactly what you want them to do. And that's what I meant here with how can you eliminate these? How can you get rid of the interpretations that might be quite valid interpretations, but aren't what you want people to do? And then last, it is really important to think about what you will do if pupils do not do what you've clearly asked them to do. And this is where your school's behaviour system will become important and being consistent with it. There is no point being really clear with your means of participation, being really, really explicit, if then when pupils don't do it, you don't do anything about it and let it go. It just sends the message to the whole class that actually the way Sir has told us to join in with this lesson is optional, up to us. And you really don't want that. Thank you. I hope that was useful. I strongly believe that means of participation and joining in is such a strong driver and a big lever to pull if you want to get purposeful and impactful lessons. Hope it was useful. Goodbye.